The uneven gravel road leads far out in the Rift Valley in central Kenya. Even out here, in these parts with small farm and livestock as the only meager income, violence after the elections in December 2007 was significant. Now, 2 years later, only a few of the displaced are back here, as Gachie Njongu with his wife and children. But it was not the first time they fled. Ethno-political violence has occurred several times in Kenya's history.
92 nilikuwako Uasin Gishu, ndio ikatokea pita. Haya nikatorokea Eremtaita hapa sasa. Juzi tena naye ikatokea tena ingine.
97. Tumemaliza ile vitu tulikuwa nayo yote ilienda. Ilichukuliwa hata tagi ya maji, Qaeda, nyumba ikabomolewa.
Like several million other Kenyans, the Njongu family has been shuffled from place to place. During the 3 months they were back, they got some help so they could rebuild their old house. They are trying to grow, but the earth is poor, and this year's drought does not improve matters. They belong to the Kikuyu tribe, while the majority around are Kalenjin, and now, with only 2 years remaining until the election, they fear, as before, for what the neighbors can do.
Tumesikilizana lakini tunangojea wakati ya kura. Unajua hii mambo inatokanga wakati ya kura. Sasa tunangojea tena tuone kama watatupiga au watasema hiyo mambo ilikuisha. Sasa tunangojea tu. Lakini
Sema tu uoga iko sababu ukishuga kitu yako hata kama ni hii tunalima ya shamba wanaigiria tu wanafuna ile iko usiku. Hata mchana unaona tu mtu anakata. Sasa huwezi uliza sababu unaogopa hii vita isitokee tena. Sasa wewe namuangalia tu.
They came back here because they didn't have anywhere else to stay. As a vulnerable minority, they are now in a lawless country without protection.
Sasa niko peke yangu. Nikikutwa nitafanya nini? Sasa mtu anaonanga heri nitoroke mapema kuliko niuawe.
Of the more than 500,000 refugees who fled violence after the last presidential election, many have not dared or had no home left to return to. Despite the government's campaign to try to resolve the situation, many still live in primitive tent camps. Like this one in Gilgil, an hour from Nairobi, where close to 500 families have been waiting for more than a year. They survive with occasional small jobs if they manage to get some.
We are waiting for the government to act because there is the 25 Kenya shillings thousand we are supposed to be paid. Some of us have not even been given 10,000 Kenya shillings. So we, in our opinion, we are expecting that the government should give us that money.
But of the government promised aid, a quarter, nearly 5 million euro, was embezzled, so the refugees had themselves to pay for the land they pitched their tents on. Everything they had to arrange themselves, except for a water pump and a tank that the missionary organization gave them. If they ever get the promised support, they will buy more land for agriculture, but nothing happens. Trying to put pressure on those responsible is not to be recommended.
The demonstration cannot work here, especially because of the Kenya army that is up there. We are going to be beaten with our children for nothing. And we may demonstrate and go to Nairobi, and at the end of the day, we just lose.
Although it is somewhat better now, Kenya is still considered by international organizations as one of the world's most corrupt, especially the Kenyan police force. So few have confidence in the judiciary. To report the one who stole and burned down one's property makes no point, not when he enjoys protection higher up.
I know those people who burnt my house, who even stole my properties. But even if you take them to the police station, I went to the police station, I wrote the statement, but even if you go and tell the policeman, this is the man who has done this, that thing will stop just there. Because the person you are taking him there, he have the money, he have been given money by the politicians, so nowhere you can take him.
In Kenya, there are a dozen major tribes, many with traditional grudges. This, together with widespread poverty, In Kenya, more than 60% live below the poverty line of $1 a day, makes the tribes easily manipulated.
This is another house here.
The violence 2 years ago is considered to be fueled by some politicians seeking support in their ethnic group.
The politicians, when he comes and start inciting them, giving them money, even giving them money to support and buy petrol and start burning our houses. You see, the politicians, they are the ones who started inciting the people.
Lack of land exacerbates the conflicts and led to many moving into the forest reserves. The government has now begun a fierce campaign to drive out all illegal residents. Behind the flower beds are the remains of a ruined hut. But this was a traditional house that has been here for long, belonging to the Ogiek tribe, the indigenous population here.
Notice ni tu kusema tu wanatunza msitu. Tuliingia kwa msitu na hapa tumekaa kama karibu miaka 20 na kitu.
One of the most important reserves is the Mau forest, which acts as a water tower for large parts of Kenya. It was here that the bloody Mau Mau uprising against the colonial power began in the 1950s, and as today, the main reason was illegal confiscation of land, chasing away of the population, and use of the resources for personal gains. Large areas of the forest are now harvested.
Ni wakubwa tu ndio wanakuja kukata juu. Sasa unajua hata wakituma watu wadogo wanakuja kata tu, bora tu wako na permit wanakata na kwenda.
And the Ogiek people became the victims. The eviction was brutal. 100 people have for more than a week been sleeping under tarpaulins spread over simple bushes, without water or toilets. They had no ability to bring their possessions, and now they just wait to be moved elsewhere. The Ogieks used to live in another part of the forest, but that area was seized for logging. So they were told to move to this part and were given vague promises of land rights.
Kuna makaratasi lakini wakati tulifuzwa hizo vitu ikafuruka tu, hatujui sasa mahali ya hizo vitu kama hata imefurushwa mahali.
So the Ogieks are without rights. Rights to land have for long been tampered with in Kenya, from colonial times to the one-party state under the presidents Kenyatta and Arap Moi until today. According to the so-called Njongu report, government land worth over 500 million euro has illegally been acquired by high-ranking politicians and officials, all named in the report. One example is a tea farm in Kiptagich, where large areas were intended for the Ogiek people and located inside the Mau Reserve. But the land was taken over illegally by, among others, former President Moi. Bringing back the ownership to the state is likely to be difficult.
There are a lot of members of government who are implicated in one way or another through past corruption, grand corruption, in terms of post-election violence. So there's a whole host of issues that confront the government, whereby the government itself finds almost itself cornered because it has to adjudicate or arbitrate of an issue that itself has massive interest in, either individually or collectively.
Working for human rights in Kenya is dangerous. Some of the Commission's staff have even been murdered, the latest a year ago. But it is now 2 years remaining until the election, and changes are deemed necessary.
The potential that the country might have another round of violence are so real that there is a need, and an urgent need for that matter, to ensure that we resolve some of these issues as soon as possible.
In Jivanji Garden in Nairobi, a mikutano to gather to discuss in Swahili is in progress. With the moderator, the groups talk about everything from football and the economy to ethnic violence and politics. As a result of the mediation process after the election violence, a new constitution is now under progress, and that is something discussed here.
There are meant to be changes, especially on the Bill of Rights, to make sure that everybody can access equal opportunity to life.
The new constitution proposes a reduction of the all-powerful presidency, an increase in women's rights, and reducing corruption in particular. The draft constitution has been out for consultation in December, and the referendum is planned to be held in March.
If the constitution, this harmonized constitution will pass and it will be enacted, yes, there will be much development and there will be hope in future for us and our children too.
The discussion is lively in the media, working without restrictions for the last 10 years, and also in the streets among ordinary Kenyans.
With the new constitution, I think we'll be able to speak out clearly on issues such as poverty, corruption, and generally, I think misusing of funds that belongs to taxpayers in Kenya.
The position of women will be considerably strengthened with the new constitution. Women will, for example, occupy at least 1/3 of the seats in parliament. And the struggle for women's rights has been going on in many places in society, even in the slums of Nairobi. Laboriously soil and fertilizers have been carried here, and finally this area is turned into a fertile garden. The women's group Vision Sisters in the Huruma slum area have had their vision come true.
Our vision was to see if we can have our own land and build our own houses whereby nobody will come and ask you rent.
Money from the vegetable cultivation has gone into repaying their houses, in a project where the residents together have built their houses, thus avoiding expensive rents. But it has taken a long time. Every penny is worth much for the poor here.
As you come with 10 shillings and you come with your saving of 20 shillings, then that money we keep them into the bank.
When the members need to borrow money from the group, all is carefully written down. Access to self-generated money has enhanced the position of women, as has been the general trend in Kenyan society.
Yeah, it has changed within the last decade of years. There was a time when the girl child had been neglected so long, we didn't get education. Sometimes we were forced to marry at an early age, but now we are able to empower ourselves, we stand for our right, and we can make decisions.
Vision Sisters' profits have already been plowed into several small but successful businesses by the group members.
So I was among the members who have been given the rooms.
Women in Africa have long been treated as workers without influence or ownership rights. When a new sewage system is to be constructed, women take responsibility.
Watu wengi tunajitolea hapa ni wamama. Kwa ajili tunajua ile kitu tunatafuta.
The proposed constitution will mean equal status for men and women, but the new law has not yet been passed.
We must wait and see whether that harmonized constitution, when it goes to the parliamentarians, where the majority are men, whether they will anyway water down what we have put in there. But I'm very comfortable and I'm very happy with issues of women, women's rights, everything concerning women in our constitution. I'm very happy.
Traditions with a subordinate woman is definitely going to give way in Kenya. Perhaps the Vision Sisters contributed a small part to that.
If the constitution go the way it is, we feel that the women of this day will be considered. It won't be like the women of the past decade.
This can bring a very good change, but a few number of Kenyans, they cannot accept that thing to pass it through because they fear what they did a long time ago will affect them.
For after decades of corruption, electoral fraud and violence, trust in politicians doesn't exist among the public.
Actually, citizens in Kenya do not trust the politicians. Okay, they always, during the campaigns, they are always promising people, but at the end of it all, they are always come out as empty promises.
Well, we need intense civic education amongst people so that they can be shown that we the people, we the ordinary people, our enemy is number one, poverty. And if we do not have poverty, nobody will manipulate us.
For politicians have blocked attempts to investigate and then prosecute those alleged to be behind the election violence. This has prompted the International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Luis Moreno Campo to try to take up the case. This is viewed with joy by the Kenyans, but perhaps expectations are a bit too high after all the murder, violence and corruption during the years.
All these political shenanigans, when you lump them together into a 40-year basket and say, this is your accountability record, you then see why there's this cry. And yes, you will find that it is a misplaced expectation in terms of expecting that Luis Moreno Campo will come and sort our problems.
The people who did all that, they do deserve to be punished for their crimes. But I also think that it's also a really powerful indictment on Kenya to change its institutions of judicial, the judicial system. We need to change it, and so that we can have a situation where we don't need outside help to deal with internal matters.
Distrust in the current political system is large, and without international pressure, there is a risk that needed changes will not take place.
If we do not start talking about accountability, if we do not also start talking about correcting the systems, what we saw in 2007 and 2008 will be a Christmas party. I think in terms of the future, if there's one certainty, if we don't deal with accountability, is that we as Kenyans are in deep trouble. And that is why we need a number of these interventions. And that is why we're also saying that it is not one intervention, it is not two, but it is multiple interventions.